Hello and namaste. I'm Suruchi from Dharma Rain, a forum for the study and practice of Indian contemplative traditions with a particular focus on Buddhism. It is my great honor and great privilege today to welcome Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. She was one of the first Westerners to be ordained as a Buddhist nun in the Tibetan tradition nearly 55 years ago. Born Diane Perry in England, her quest to know the true nature of the mind led her to Buddhism and promptly brought her to India, where she has lived since. Jetsunma famously spent 12 years in a cave in the Himalayas, and so happy was she there that were it not for bureaucratic complications, she would have continued her solitary retreat. A strong voice for women practitioners. Presently, Jetsunma has a nunnery in Palmo, Himachal Pradesh called the Dongyu Gatsaling Nunnery, which supports the education of over 100 nuns. Under her guidance, some of the nuns have gone on to receive Geshe-ma degrees, and some are in long retreat and receive instructions from Togden masters who are highly realized yogic practitioners. And a very warm welcome to all of you listeners who are joining us from all over the world to hear Jetsunma's take on how to uproot our delusions, especially gleaning wisdom from the current times. Thank you also, everybody, for sending in your questions. We may not be able to get to all of them, but in the interest of greater good, questions of a very personal nature have been left out for the time being. But having said that, if you listen keenly, many questions have been combined and paraphrased. So most of your queries will be miraculously answered by Jetsunma, the mind reader. So without any further ado, Jetsunma, and with your permission, I'd like to start unraveling on how to uproot our delusions. So as we stand at the exit door of a year that felt like a century really, and as we step into more uncertainty ahead, I'd like to launch this session, Jetsunma, with the question of all questions, which is, what is this pandemic teaching us? As we try to reclaim our old lives, the temptation to catapult back into our old habitual ways is so strong, and more so because it gives us some semblance of control and fast tracks our return to normal, or at least whatever our idea of normal is. So what lessons can we or should we glean from this crisis? And what is the opportunity here to evolve?
Well, of course, Ruchi, that's an enormous question, and many people are answering it in many different ways. To my mind, one of the interesting parts is how it has really pointed out our interconnection. Normally, when we hear about some tragedies or some, pandemic, it's always in some other part of the world, usually in the less fortunate parts. And so it's something we just watch on the news. But here is something which has been completely global. It's taken over east, west, north, south, high, low. The virus is wonderfully indiscriminating. I mean, it is totally one taste. And it just takes where it wishes to go. And it shows that we are all equally, as human beings, vulnerable. Male, female, rich, poor, doesn't matter. Doesn't culture, gender, irrelevant.
Sorry about that interruption.
So, I mean, what I was saying was that this virus has made us all very interdependent, that there is no discrimination between country, gender, race, high, low, rich, poor. The virus itself is very, very non-discriminating. And it has brought us all together into our interconnection as human beings on this planet, that the virus isn't caring about borders. I mean, if you go up into space and look down on the Earth, you just see the Earth, you don't see all the immigration officers. And so this is what the virus has shown us, that we are all together and equally vulnerable. And at the same time, equally resourceful, and people have dealt with this incredible who would have guessed? I mean, you know, it's something which there's no precedent for in at least in our historical times, that the whole world has participated in this lockdown. So it is very noticeable that those who have some spiritual path have taken the opportunity to really take these problems onto the path with them, that they are, many of them, especially if they have not any particular, you know, anxieties outside of their situation, have taken the time to do practices and to reevaluate what is important in their lives and what is not important. In addition, many spiritual teachers, including many Tibetan lamas and others, have taken the opportunity. Now people cannot come to them, that they go to the people through Zooms and YouTubes and all these online courses. It's so rich now that one doesn't need even to travel. One just sits in one's own living room and there it is, all given to you. And I mean, that's an incredible richness. Even, I mean, I have taken to giving refuge online, because many people say, please, can we take refuge, and precepts? How can you say no? So wherever they are on the planet, they can't come to India, but India can come to them. So there, you know, there are, I mean, along with the terrible, terrible anxiety, especially of people losing their jobs and families being forced to be together day and night for weeks, months, and now years. And the incidence of suicides, especially among young people, and domestic violence and so forth. I mean, the horrible things are happening. We cannot say that this has been a glory year for most people. But as with everything in samsara, you know, what is difficult for one might be an opportunity for another. And on the whole, people have proved themselves really quite extraordinarily generous, kind, sharing, and resourceful. So we just have to be brave and, you know, reach out to others as much as we can. Our nuns are doing so many prayers nowadays. Wow. For the planet and for individuals. And yes, you know, it's a very, very interesting time that we're living in. And we cannot go back. I mean, people long for the normal. What is the normal? The normal, for one thing, was destroying the planet. And it's good that we are not normal anymore. And that we have had a chance to really think out what is important and what is not important, what we can't live without, and what we can obviously live without because we're living without it. And that, like that, you know, different people respond different ways, as always. Slowly, slowly now they have the vaccine. India has been very generous with the vaccine, really, really exemplary. And, you know, we see what this year has to bring us. This year is the year of the iron ox. And to my mind, an ox, you know, India knows about oxen. And, you know, you think of the ox plowing the fields, the ox drawing the carts along the roads, slowly, steadily, but with such strength and patience. And it will accomplish its tasks. It doesn't give up halfway through. And this is a wonderful symbol for this year now, that we can draw on our inner strength and our inner resilience to walk forward step by step.
Indeed, this year has been a true test of our resilience and generosity. That is something I saw in really big measure. People really came out with open hearts to help people, help others. So I hope we continue with that rather than just quickly shifting back to our old ways and rushing after, you know, our own ambition to.
Well, some will and some won't is where it's at. Really, you know, it's always like that. I mean, some people just only think of themselves and other people think of the implications of how they've been living their lives up to now.
Right.
I'm trying to see if I can find, I have here a microphone, but I'm not quite sure how I put it into this thing. Anyway, please go on.
I can hear you clearly enough for now.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So you already touched upon this, Jetsunma. So I'm going to ask you to expand on this a little bit, which is how to make spirituality our lived experience. I mean, the general tendency is to sequester our practice to the temple or the cushion, as the case may be, and to live our daily lives as something separate altogether. So how do we apply these wonderful teachings to our lives? Or as someone said on behalf of all of us, actually, he said, I'm an ordinary human with a fickle mind, and there are days which look good, and then there are days where everything becomes mindless.
Yes, I think this is an extraordinarily important subject, because indeed, even in the West, people nowadays, and even in Asians sometimes, they get the idea in Asian Buddhist countries that, doing rituals, doing meditation, visiting temples and making offerings, this is Dharma practice. Right. And everyday life with family, with jobs, with social engagements, that's just worldly activity. And sometimes even Tibetan lamas talk like that. It's quite shocking. Because whether we are sitting on our cushion, whether we are visiting the temple, whether we are in the home, in the kitchen, doing the cooking, or at work, doing whatever is our calling, we have our mind with us. Wherever we go, we take our heart mind. And that is what is going to be practicing the Dharma. So therefore, everything which we do in our daily life, if we do it with loving awareness, with kindness, with patience, with humor, with, just a good heart and some clarity, mindfulness, trying to be present as much as possible. That's a perfect Dharma practice. What more do we need? So then the cushion allows us to go more deeply, but then that we take into our daily lives, watching the responses of our mind when we get angry, when we get upset, when we get jealous, or, whatever, noticing those negative emotions and allowing them to rise, be recognized, and then let them go and replace them with something more positive. What better Dharma practice is that? I mean, to sit on your cushions thinking, may all beings be well and happy is one thing, but then you go out and meet those beings and they're absolutely horrible. When is a better time to practice loving kindness? If we get upset again, then what have we learned sitting on our cushions? So daily life. I mean, sometimes I say, if you think of Western style bread, not the chapati, but Western style bread, you have a lump of dough, and then that which is very heavy, right, and indigestible, unless you make it into chapati. And then you mix it with yeast, right? And then only a little bit of yeast, not much yeast, but you mix it with the dough. Then the dough of itself rises. Then we can cook it. And then it's very delicious to eat and nourishing. The point is that we don't throw away the dough, right? We're not just eating the yeast, which, in other words, we need everyday life to mix with the Dharma. The Dharma, a little Dharma in daily life, lightens the whole day and makes it into a very nourishing spiritual practice.
That's beautiful, Jetsunma. You once shared that Dharma practice is like salt in the food, and a little bit of salt in everything just makes everything so much tastier.
This is what the Buddha said. This is what the Buddha said. I mean, he used salt. You put salt in all the curries, and then it becomes delicious. But you don't need to flood it with salt,
Right. Right. Right.
So that makes our daily life meaningful. And all the difficulties which we encounter during the daily life is no longer such a hardship, because we recognize this is the treadmill on which we are going to get strong.
Unfortunately, we happen to be running on the wrong treadmill, the hedonic one, and it kind of distracts us from the true path. So thank you for showing us some skillful ways on how to keep integrating spirituality into our daily life. Which brings me to questions around practice, Jetsunma. What is more important, shamatha or vipassana, and which is to be developed first and why?
Okay, so both shamatha and vipassana are equally important, but we start with shamatha. Shamatha literally means it means calm abiding, or staying calmly, peacefully. And it's a method of two things, really. One is that it's usually a kind of concentration practice. So we first, for example, bring our attention to the breath. This is a very common in all Buddhist schools, not a pranayama, just ordinary breathing in, breathing out, and knowing that we are breathing. So if we are able to keep our minds resting quietly in a very relaxed and spacious way, not tight, but knowing, then the mind naturally begins to calm down and become more quiet eventually. It might seem more crazy in the beginning, but eventually it will calm down. And most importantly, it cultivates the ability to be aware, to be mindful. It helps us to withdraw so that we can observe. We can observe the breath. Normally we breathe and we are not even conscious of breathing. Mm-hmm. But in fact, now we bring our attention to the breath. And so the other point with the breath, why it's very useful, is that, of course, we cannot breathe in the past, we cannot breathe in the future, we only can breathe now. So if we are really resting on the in-breath and the out-breath, we are in the present moment, which is very hard for the mind to stay in the present. Meantime, all the thoughts in the background, we just ignore them. If we get caught up in them, we bring the mind back again. Eventually, the mind becomes very stable and quite strong. Our ability to observe the thoughts. Now, we turn the attention from the breath to the thoughts themselves. Mm-hmm. And we step back from the thoughts. The traditional example is of a river flowing. Normally, we are in the river, swept along by the river. We are our thoughts. And so we believe our thoughts. If I think it, it must be true. And so we believe our memories, we believe our fantasies and daydreams and everything. It has to be real because this is what I think. Now we are taking the ability to observe, to be conscious, and we're stepping outside of the stream and we're sitting on the bank, watching the stream go by. Then we begin to recognize that we are not the thoughts, we are not the feelings, and everything we think is not true. So that is all shamatha. At a certain point, also, we can drop the object altogether and just remain in what is called objectless shamatha, which is when we are aware of being aware, with nothing, not subject aware, object, what we are aware of, like the breath or the thoughts, but just the awareness in itself. That is all shamatha. When our mind is able to stay focused on one point for a certain amount of time, and at the same time is able to, as it were, almost merge with what it is observing to see it, then we move over into Vipassana. Vipassana, which means insight or seeing things clearly. That is the time when we give, in the Tibetan tradition, the Vipassana is on the mind. In Goenka, it's on the sensations. In the Tibetan tradition, we look at the mind and we think, well, we are swimming in an ocean of thought. Everything we know is because we're thinking. And we're like fish in the water. We don't know what is water. It's just what we live in. And likewise with our thoughts, we don't know what is the thought. What is a thought? Where does it come from? What does it look like? Where does it go to? What is a thought? And then who is thinking? You know, and so the Vipassana, we begin to think again. We begin to have a big question mark and stop taking everything for granted. Look, examine, question, analyze. So this is, in the Tibetan tradition, this is how Vipassana is done. It's for really, really understanding with the mind with the mind. So it cannot be done if our shamatha is not strong. Because the mind then is like the monkey mind jumping all over the place. And we cannot make that separation between the thoughts and the observer of the thoughts. First, we have to be able to do that. Once we have done that, once we can step back from the thinking and just observe the thoughts as thoughts, not me and mine, then we stop identifying with the thoughts and we become more and more the masters of our mind instead of, as usual, the slaves of our mind. So this is why shamatha comes first, and Vipassana is very important. Shamatha of itself, even though we can go into very deep states of samadhi, of itself does not liberate, because it is not getting to the heart of the matter, you know, of what is consciousness, which is the role of Vipassana.
Thank you so much. So you talked about understanding the mind with the mind. So I'll digress to a different question altogether, which was you have often said that we need to make friends with the ego to overcome the ego. So could you please talk a little bit more about it? Because pampering the ego only seems to make it so much more dominant. And again, we start seeking pleasure and avoiding suffering so intensely. And our ordinary conceptual thinking mind then seems to thrive in duality. So how do we train it to go beyond the egoic self?
Well, the reason why I say that we have to make friends with our own ego is because sometimes, you know, Buddhism seems to be full of ego bashing, and the ego is the bad guy. And yet, the Buddha started by teaching shamatha, of which one aim is to make the mind very balanced and very healthy. We cannot go into deeper levels of samadhi or any kind of concentration unless the mind is very, very healthy and balanced. And at the same time, the Buddha taught that we should give loving kindness, metta or maitri, and compassion and joy to ourselves first, before we give it to others. Now, the root of maitri is to be a friend. So basically it means we have to make friends with ourselves.
I'm sorry, someone has, can you please all mute yourself? Thank you. Sorry about that, Jetsunma.
So, I mean, the point is that who are we sending loving kindness and compassion to when we give it to ourselves? We are not sending this to the nature of the mind, or our Buddha nature, because the Buddha nature is loving kindness and compassion. It doesn't need our loving kindness and compassion. Who are we giving our loving kindness when we say, may I be well and happy? May I be free from suffering? May I be peaceful and at my ease? Who? Well, obviously the ego. So we are trying to first, and honestly, Suruchi, who is walking the path? We can say there is no I. Who is saying there is no I? I mean, anyone who says, I am egoless, I mean, who is saying, I am egoless? No?
Right.
It's nonsense, right?
Right.
So the point is that who is walking the path, and to a very, very, very high spiritual level, the eighth bhumi or an arhat, it's going to be little me. And so in order to walk the path with all the difficulties, all the obstacles, as well as the good parts, we have to have a confident sense of self that is going to be able to walk this path. And so we have to make friends with ourselves, to have a good companion on the path, forgive ourselves, have compassion for our faults. It doesn't mean that we don't try to get better. It doesn't mean we pamper ourselves, but we try to be healthy inwardly. People who have psychological problems are always thinking about themselves. Me, 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 me. When they talk, only me, 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 me. Someone who is really at peace within themselves, at home within themselves. They're not thinking much about themselves. They take care of themselves, of course, but basically they're thinking, how can they benefit others? Right. And you see that. I say sometimes it's like if we have a leg which we have broken and it's in a cast, then we can't walk properly. We're always thinking, oh, my poor leg, my poor leg. If somebody hits it, ow, my poor leg, my poor leg. It's pretty useless, but we're always thinking about it. But when the leg heals, then we can run, skip, and jump, but we're not thinking leg, leg, leg. People who have a healthy leg practically never think about their legs, And so this is like the ego, the sense of self. It has to be, we have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe in our own potential to walk the path towards selflessness. But just saying there's no self, or beating ourselves up and telling us how hopeless we are and how useless we are and so forth, just is another way for the ego to enjoy itself, thinking about itself, even whether the ego is happy or whether the ego is miserable. If the ego is in charge, then all it's going to do is think about itself. So this is why the Buddha himself said, you start by making friends. And with yourself, when you have peace, and that you can then extend it towards all the others, those you love, those you're indifferent towards, and those we have difficulties with, and then the whole world in very conditional love. But we start with ourselves. It's very important to realize this is not some new age about pampering ourselves and only thinking me, me, me. It's a way of becoming healthy so that we can stop thinking about me. But we always should take care of ourselves. This is why the Buddha said it's a middle way between extremes, right? Yes, we have to take care of ourselves. Through taking care of ourselves, we have the capacity to take care of others.
That's beautiful, Jetsunma. Yeah, especially because self-compassion is an often misunderstood action, actually, because it's labeled as selfishness, or sometimes people just don't know the middle way and go from one extreme to the other, from being completely self-denigrating and low self-esteem to extremely high levels of indulgence. So one can get lost somewhere and not be on the middle path. So thank you so much for, and there were actually many questions centering around self-compassion. So this is an important one. And in fact, the first time I did metta practice and it started with self-compassion, I was kind of nervous and uncomfortable because one tends not to do that, whether it's a self-sacrificing nature or our conditioning that makes us always want to do things that appear either heroic or that come from a genuine place of caring for others, but not the self first. So thank you. And really, when one is healthy, both in body and mind, then one can really give off oneself to others selflessly.
And, I always say we have to breathe in as well as breathing out. If you're always breathing in, you'll get asphyxiated, and likewise breathing out. It has to have the balance. We breathe in to care for ourselves, we breathe out to care for others.
Right.
Then we keep going. And many people who are into social work, the problem is they keep breathing out. And they don't give care to themselves. They feel that's selfish, yes. But in fact, it's essential, because otherwise you just burn out and then you can't help anybody.
Right. Yeah, thank you for addressing that, because it would seem that there are many attendees who are looking after loved ones who are unwell, some seriously unwell. So there were a lot of questions around burnout and around finding that balance between taking care of self and others. So this is an important one, because we tend to overdo it, again, not remembering to stay centered with this.
We are also sentient beings, and we're supposed to be caring for all sentient beings. So this is the sentient being we especially have a responsibility for. So therefore, it's important that we also have compassion for ourselves as well as having compassion for others. Otherwise, yes, as you're saying, it doesn't work. And one just ends up feeling depleted or exploited, or, in general, just burned out. And that doesn't help anybody. Nobody benefits from that.
And never has this been more glaringly obvious than during this pandemic, where everyone was being stretched. Yeah.
But they have to, it's like anything. It's like, elastic. If you keep pulling, in the end, it either snaps or it goes limp. Mm-hmm. So, we have to use a bit of common sense here, right. and be kind to ourselves as well as being kind to others. And lighten up. Humor is very, very important. Not to take ourselves too seriously, or even the situation we are in, with all the compassion in the world. I mean, I think often of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, who, people come to him all the time with all their terrible problems from all over the world. They know he's, like the Bodhisattva of compassion, so they dump all their problems on him. And when he hears, he weeps, he has such a huge open heart, and he just cries with them, and they all cry together. And then, 5 minutes later, he's cracking jokes and they're all laughing away. And everybody comes out just feeling like they've taken their load and put it onto him. Right. So they're all smiling, but he doesn't hold it down like a big, heavy rock in his heart. Because of his wisdom, he's able to then dissolve it and let it go, so that it's not something heavy. When we think of His Holiness, we think of his great love.
Right. Yeah, it's really special, his capacity to hold both pain and so much joy in almost a childlike way. It's really quite beautiful, yeah, and inspiring. And you talk about this quite often, about humor and its importance. So perhaps you could just expand on this a little more, Jetsunma, about this lightness both in our practice and in our lives, because we just tend to get so uptight about both.
About what?
About, having a certain lightness in the way we approach both life and our dharma practice, and how we blend the two, actually.
I think it's very important. A sense of humor is really an essential part of the path. It doesn't say that in the texts. I always say it should be the 7th paramita.
Oh,
but when you meet great lamas, you can see there's so much joy, so much light. And not just lamas, but spiritual teachers of all traditions, of all religions. If they're genuinely spiritual, their eyes are dancing with joy and love and compassion. but they love to get together and laugh. You know, I mean, when you go to these interspiritual conferences, there's such a lightness there. Everybody's joking and enjoying each other and appreciating each other. But with all, when you hear the activities which they're doing with the homeless and with the, you know, all sorts of tremendous social problems which they're dealing with day by day by day, but there's no darkness there. There's no heaviness. There's light and there's laughter and there's love. Oh, light, love, and laughter. That's the 3 L's, right?
Yes. That's beautiful, actually. Love, light, and laughter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although you also often talk about love, light, and intelligence as being divine energy or God or whatever we want to name
But
it.
the universe is, you know, and it's not something dark. It's not something materialistic or mechanistic. The whole universe, from the vast planetary systems down to the smallest cellular being, has intelligence. It all knows what it's doing. And at the same time, there's at the heart of everything, there is this light, there is this love. I mean, that is our true nature. And that's what we have to always remember. Not only we have that nature, however covered over it may be right now, everybody has that nature. And they don't know it, but they've got it.
In fact, you said it this afternoon, Jetsunma, about the joyful state as being our true nature. And unfortunately that we have forgotten it. So perhaps again, if you could just go deeper with this and show people how we can find that true nature or reconnect with our joyful state, especially when at the relative level, we seem to be constantly just navigating life and struggling. Everything feels like a striving and a struggling lately for so many of us. So I'm just wondering how to remain close to our true nature, that joyful state.
Well, I mean, like with everything, I mean, first of all, it's important to remember that is our true nature. And that is the sky, and it's covered over with sometimes very thick black clouds, like in the monsoon. And you can go for days, weeks, and months and never see the sky, but the sky is there. And those black clouds could not exist if it were not for the nature of the sky, which is clarity and luminosity. That is our true nature. And all genuine spiritual traditions know that. They may give it different names: Atman, Anatman, Buddha nature, Dharmakaya, God, the goddess, the divine, Shiva, Krishna, who cares? It's only names. But what is the basis of our true nature is there and can be experienced and realized. And this is very important because sometimes people really identify with all the negative in themselves. And they don't realize that those just are the clouds. They are not the true nature at all. Our true nature is beautiful and joy, really, bliss. You know, so this is why the great beings have laughter inside them. Love, but also a lightness, a joy. Their eyes are sparkling. And that's our true nature. And this is what we really need to know. So we start by learning how to be mindful or aware, right? So this is the shamatha, that we learn how to step back and observe, to get a sense of inner presence and not be always, you know, running after our monkey minds. Then we begin to understand what is the mind and that we are not our thoughts and feelings. We have thoughts and feelings, they're very useful, but they are not me, they are not mine. There's something more than that. And so then that awareness, that mindfulness is very important to witness without being constantly involved in all our emotions and feelings. But that is also dualistic. There is the observer and the observed. And so, but it's a bridge to that level of awareness, which we all have, this primordial, pure awareness, which in Mahayana is called our Buddha nature, which is empty, but at the same time, luminous clarity and knowing. It's pure knowing. We all have it because you can hear me, right? You can think. You couldn't do that if we didn't have this fundamental pure consciousness. And this, of course, is what neuroscientists now are trying, like anything, to try to find, because they can see that we are more than the brain. But what is this consciousness? They can't find it on their machines. And so for a long time, they denied it could exist if you can't find it. But now they're recognizing, no, this is something incredible, but we just honestly don't know what it is right now. But at least now they're recognizing that consciousness exists, and it's who we really are, not the brain, not the body, consciousness. Mm-hmm. So that's what we have to discover. That's what meditation is all about. It's not really just about making us feel better. It might end up in the start by making us feel worse. But it's to really, really uncover our true nature. Once we have glimpsed it, then we know that we are not who we think we are. And so that's a huge step forward. And mostly it's glimpse by glimpse.
Thank you. We tend to lose that glimpse quite quickly. So I'm going to launch a question about afflictive emotions, because you already mentioned the involvement of science improving consciousness, and so now I'm digressing into mind training, Jetsunma, because even as I understand the importance of mind training and I'm paying attention to all the conversations around neuroplasticity, when in the throes of an emotional hijack, it would seem that the chemicals in the brain simply take over. And then at that moment, it's all about fight or flight. So at that time, how do I call up on my inner resources to act sensibly and sanely? I mean, it would seem that mind training, while effective, is a very long process. And so sometimes in intense moments, the emotions of anger, jealousy, or even self-pity just feel so juicy that one wants to stay in it. So if you could just throw some light on both the importance of mind training, and while we are in this training process, how do we really watch where we are going?
Well, my love, it's all about practice, isn't it? Because the point is that we have all these habitual responses, which we have learned since beginningless time. Somebody upsets us, we get angry, we get defensive, and as you say, the fight and flight or freeze, that's very primal in our brain. But we can restructure the brain. I think one of the, neuroscience still has a long way to go. It's a very new science, but they're doing their best. One of the beautiful things which they discovered was that the neural pathways can be changed. And originally they thought it was genetically engineered. It's all your DNA, how you are is how you are, that's it. And all the neural pathways are just there, then that's the end of it. And now they've discovered that's absolutely not true at all. And we absolutely can change. I remember reading an article by somebody who it was naturally quite an irascible sort of person. He would get angry very quickly. So he thought, well, he would do one of these meditation weekends on loving kindness, give it a go. So he spent the weekend thinking, may I be well and happy, may all beings be well and happy. And at the end of the weekend, he thought, what a load of tosh, really, that not done anything, what a waste. And then he was in the car park, and a car, there was a place, a gap, a vacancy. He was about to go into it, and another car shot out and got into the place. And he found himself thinking, that's nice. May you be well and happy. And he couldn't believe it. He said normally he would be banging his hooter and screaming and shouting and all getting upset and would have spoiled his whole morning. And now automatically, okay, you must be happy. So that's nice for you. Good. May you be well. May you be happy. And so I don't know if that carried on like that for long, but the fact is that even just a weekend of trying did something, you know, that's the point, that it actually did automatically make a change. So it's practice makes perfect, as we say. You know, we just have to keep practicing, and every time we fall down, we stand up again and we just keep toddling along. You know, that's the point, not to start berating ourselves, not get angry with ourselves because we're feeling angry. But again, later we could play the scene again and think, now, how could I have done better? What could I have said which would have alleviated the situation a bit? If they're angry with me and say nasty things to me, I'm angry and say nasty things back, then it's just like, you know, a game of tennis, you know, hitting balls back and forwards. What's the use? If I let their ball just fall in my court, that's the end of the game. And so, you know, that is sometimes quite helpful when the mind is quiet. We sit and do some shamatha, looking at the breath, then bring up a difficult scene again and just try to rewrite the script so that, you know, it doesn't end up the way it did, that maybe at that moment you feel quite triumphant, but you know in your heart it's not bringing you peace. And that's not the way to go. There must be a more profound way to deal with these difficult situations, and just keep trying. Next time you fall down again, no problem. I mean, I always say, you know, it's like toddlers learning to walk, you know, and their legs are weak and they hold on to things and they take a step or two, then they fall down. Then they pull themselves up, then they try again, then they fall down. And however many times that baby falls down, it never thinks, I cannot do this. Other people have strong legs. Me, look at them, they're bandy, they're weak. I am never going to be able to walk. I shall always have to crawl. No baby is that stupid. The baby thinks if other people can walk, I can walk. And so however many times it falls down, it will get up and start again. And within no time, the legs begin to get strong until, you know, it's running around all over the place. So like that, you know, if we just try, we fall down, we stand up, we try again next time, and just keep working at it and encourage ourselves and recognize how sad to have a mind which says and does such bad things. You know, I don't want that mind. I'm so sorry for them. They are trapped in that kind of mind. I wouldn't want that mind. Imagine being them. How awful, poor things. And give them, you know, compassion and love, because they're suffering too. So in this way, we work with what happens and we don't berate ourselves. We don't get upset with ourselves. What can I learn from that? Oops, that went wrong. Okay, now what did I do wrong that it ended up like that? Let's try again to do better next time and bring this onto the path. So everything is an experience, and Lojong is wonderful because it is such a way of taking everything, especially the really unpleasant things, and using them as our Dharma practice, so that we become grateful for the people who are difficult. And if you can't manage gratitude, at least we can imagine that, you know, they are our helpers on the path. Whether they intend to be or not is not the point. Right. So we're learning all the time. Somebody said that life is, you know, it's the schoolroom of the soul. And in any school, you want to have a few hard lessons. If it's too easy, it's boring. So when those teachers are giving you hard tasks to accomplish, then you should be grateful for them. You don't want it too easy. Then you can graduate.
Some beautiful analogies here, Jetsunma, about life as the schoolroom for the soul. That's really fantastic because, one tends to avoid obstacles and challenges with so much gusto, but actually you always say that opportunities or obstacles have to be brought onto the path as a way for growing.
Well, it's true. It's true, Suruchi. That's the point. It's not just some kind of platitude. It's hard and it's painful. And we're not wishing obstacles and difficulties in people. But when they come, to recognize that this is our opportunity to really, get strong muscles. That nothing is wasted. Everything can be taken and used as our practice.
So working out in our spiritual gym.
Exactly that. I mean, it's so important to remember these things, because they're, as I say, they're not just platitudes. They're true.
Yeah, beautiful. I also really loved the analogy that you gave of the toddler never giving up, because this is such a good understanding not to berate ourselves. And again, the self-compassion aspect comes back in right here to say that if I make mistakes, because all of us are fallible in that way, then how do we regret it and make amends and apply the antidote and move on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I really appreciate about the Buddha Dharma is that it doesn't just tell you have to be kind, you have to be tolerant, you have to be patient. It gives you methods by which you can cultivate these qualities. And encouragement for recognizing that we all can cultivate these qualities because they are our true nature. Our anger, our self-indulgence, our any upsets and difficulties that we have are not our true nature. This is so important, that we don't identify with the negativities within us, but that we recognize that when we do have a moment of patience, when we do have a moment of compassion or loving kindness or generosity or any of these good qualities, this is coming from a very deep level within us, which is true. It's coming from our true nature. And that's very beautiful. We are not sinners. We are absolutely divine beings.
Thank you for that beautiful reminder, Jetsunma.
It's important that we all remember, because sometimes we get very identified with all that's wrong and all our mistakes. And we forget that that's just passing. That's just passing. I mean, that's why I say sometimes without it becoming too, analogies should never be pushed too far. But the example of the silver pot, right? If you leave the silver pot, then it will get tarnished. And over the years, it will become brown, then it will become black. And so then when we look at it, all we see is this ugly black pot. But if we start to clean it, if we start to polish and then the tarnish gradually wears away, and it has never affected the nature of the pot. The pot never was tarnished. The tarnish was always outside the pot. The silver pot, even if it's been thousands of years sitting in some kind of, coffin or something and comes out all black, when it's polished, it's pure silver. And so, of course, we don't have silver pots inside us, but it gives the idea that our true nature, however awful we might be, however many terrible things we have done, even Hitler, their pure nature has never been affected for 1 second. Their pure Buddha nature is just there, perfect and complete, and just waiting to be recognized. During the American political problems, we had some American volunteers, and I said to them, your mantra is, even Trump has Buddha nature. We all have Buddha nature.
Sorry about that. Since you brought up Trump and Hitler and them having Buddha nature too, but the fact of the matter is that at a relative level or conventional level, we experience what they do, not so much who they are in terms of their Buddha nature. So how then do we keep forgiveness and forbearance in our heart? And I'm using these two extreme examples, but you know, the forgiveness element is so important even in general in our interactions with people and all our experiences. So if you could just talk a little bit about the importance of forgiveness in light of the big picture that everyone has Buddha nature, yet at a conventional level, because of their own, I guess, ignorance and suffering, they do what they do.
Well, I mean, undoubtedly, there are people who are very, very, very entrenched in negativities. They are really quite evil. And especially evil are those who rejoice in the suffering of others. Which they cause others. And that, to my mind, is genuine evil. And they will suffer for it because they are making extremely heavy, heavy karma. But at the same time, from our side, it's no point in hating them. I mean, we should feel incredible compassion because what's going to happen next lifetime is awful beyond thought. And I mean, there are hell realms and they last an awfully long time. I mean, the hell realms themselves are projected by the mind, but the mind's being so distorted with their evil, then it just, you know, it goes on, and the suffering is tremendous. But in this lifetime, imagine what it must be like to be trapped in a mind like that. So while we do not in any way endorse what they have done, especially if they're very pleased with themselves for what they have done, nonetheless, we can feel so sorry for them and what is going to happen to them next. And the fact that in their heart of heart, how can they be at peace? You cannot be at peace. They might be very exalted and full of, you know, their ego prominence and their joy and power and control. But that's not genuine happiness. Genuine happiness is something very, very different and very, very far from where they are. So, you know, when people do things which are very bad for us personally or for those that we love, it's not a matter per se of forgetting. You can't forget, but we can let it go. Because if we hold on to our resentment and our desire for revenge, then that tortures us far more than it harms them, right? We do to ourselves what only our worst enemies would wish for us. So there's no point. I mean, why are we torturing ourselves? Which is exactly what they want. So the only thing to do is to accept the fact they did these bad things. It was really very bad. They are going to reap the results of that, if not in this lifetime, in future lifetimes. And meantime, let it go. And accept they were bad and that it's in the past. It's gone now. And give them compassion.
Jetsunma, I'd like you to just go on because I lost my audio for a few seconds. So I'm just going to leave you with a question while I adjust my audio, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I'm actually going to ask a burning question, and especially in light of all the discrimination that one sees and one experiences as a woman, I'm going to ask a very big question about the divine feminine. which is that as a woman practitioner and a torchbearer who inspires so many of us, could you speak a little bit about the feminine principle and the power of women themselves and that feminine energy at this time of major global and ecological crisis? Because it seems to me that rather than integrating the feminine wisdom, we have been gradually shifting to a very technologically charged, masculine, analytic paradigm that speaks only to and of material progress. But I feel with their unique understanding of sacredness, the feminine understands compassion. The feminine understands interconnectedness and suffering so deeply. So, how can we step up to this role of divine energy, which has this luminous, nurturing quality? Sorry, big question, but it's an important one for me.
Well, yes, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think, first of all, that women are designed by nature to be mothers, and therefore they are normally much more in tune with their emotions, and especially emotions of compassion and loving kindness and so forth, generosity, because without that they would never be able to bring up small children who demand so much of patience and loving kindness through everything. And so women are naturally much more in tune with that emotional side of their lives. And boys, of course, are told at a very young age, big boys don't cry, don't be emotional, oh, you're just being a girl, as if that's a bad thing. And so they have been taught from very early age to subdue their emotional empathy, whereas women are not taught that, and they are naturally much more empathetic. In addition, women are usually much more intuitive. They're at home in the intuitive. And many male meditation teachers have said this, and that they really prefer to teach women to men because women are not afraid to jump into the intuitive in the way that the men prefer to go, usually stage by stage by stage, much more intellectual. They are afraid of that which goes beyond the intellect, whereas women feel at home with that. The Tibetans translated the word dakini into those khandro, which means to travel in space. And so women naturally have that empathy and that ability to practice. And what women don't often have is respect for other women. And I think that this is one of the things which keeps women down and has done so for millennia, is not just the men, but that the women themselves do not support each other and respect each other and uphold each other and empower each other. If they did that, what could the men do? So I think it's very important that women do not try to become more masculine than the males, as you're saying. A lot of the women who come to prominence, it's because they've fought harder and meaner than their male colleagues. But that is not contributing anything to the world situation and the balance of male and female. It's just adding more to the male side and all the things which have gone wrong because the world is so out of balance. So it needs the nurturing and the wisdom of the feminine. In Buddhism, wisdom it's female, right? Prajnaparamita, Sophia in the Greek. It was understand that women have this intelligence and this intuitive intelligence, which goes beyond purely intellectual rationalizations. And that's what the world needs. And apart from, the other problem is that women have been exploited into becoming like Barbie dolls. And that's also very, very sad because, we're not the body. The body is there and the body is very useful, but, we are not, that's not what it's all about. And when, you know, that's how we judge each other. Of course, men are always attracted by beauty, but women at least should see a little bit less superficially and appreciate and encourage each other, hold hands together. This is one of the reasons why Sakadita, we really should do it again in India. Sakadita, this International Buddhist Women's Conference, and is so important because women of all Buddhist traditions and sometimes from other sides, Muslims and Hindus and Christians also attend, and men attend too, some. But it's primarily for Buddhist women of all traditions, Theravada, Mahayana, all countries, especially Asian, all come together to talk about what the Dharma means to them and how they practice and how, you know, any stories and anecdotes and just enjoying being with each other and holding each other and so much laughter. This is what is so beautiful and why many of the monks love to go to it, because they say they have been to so many conferences, nothing like this one. So much fun. Everybody just loves each other and they don't care about where you're from or which tradition you're following or what meditation practices you're doing or anything. It's so irrelevant. We're women and we're all trying to practice the Buddhist path, and that's a joy. And so this is what women need, to respect each other, enjoy each other, encourage each other, not complain so too much, but strengthen each other in the joy of being female. How wonderful that is. I mean, recently we did Nyungnera nunnery, where you do prostrations and fasting, a lot of fasting. And so a whole large group, about 13 or 14 monks, came from our monastery of Tashijong. And they sat behind the senior nuns. The senior nuns were leading all the ritual. The monks sat behind the senior nuns. And they were so happy. And they were so sweet. And we put them in our, they had to stay for a week. So they stayed in the short-term retreat center, which is now empty because we're in lockdown. And the nuns said at the end of it all the monks were cleaning even the bathrooms and everything, making it very clean, because when they came, of course, it had been very, very clean. But so sweet, you know, and they love the nuns. They really admire and support them and try to help them. And the nuns really respect and love the monks. And it's like brothers and sisters, and nobody's trying to, you know, subdue anybody. Everybody's proverbially holding hands together to bring together, both walking the same path. And that's how it should be. That equal respect for the nuns, respect for lay women, respect for the lay men, everybody appreciating each other's qualities. That's the way to go.
That's really beautiful, Jetsunma. And nowhere is this more apparent than the mutual understanding and growth that is happening at DGL and Tashijong, where you often talk about how the nuns visit the monastery at Tashijong and practice there or go for their picnics there, and how the monks visit the nunnery to teach and to partake of different festivals. So I think that's really beautiful. Yeah.
Yes, and how it can be, you know, neither side is exploiting the other side. And there's this deep appreciation of how nuns do it, how monks do it, and how they can do it together. And that shows how, you know, our harmonious dwelling together should be. You know, neither side feels demeaned by the relationship.
Right. I have a feeling that, well, not a feeling, but I have a conviction that women have just kind of become the victims of the market, what the market, the image that the market has created for them, and the concepts, the age-old concepts which no longer hold, by which we still continue to live, which is what kind of fires the discrimination that is still so prevalent in so many countries.
Everywhere.
Everywhere, actually, yes.
Everywhere. And this is why women need to support women,
Mm.
you know, and enjoy women, you know, enjoy their own wisdom, their own humor, their own goodness.
Right. Yeah, and camaraderie.
So this is why women need to have good women friends as well as good male friends, you know.
Right. Yes. Thank you. We have some really nice questions around karma, Jetsunma, and there's a really nice one which talks about, which asks whether our present is more powerful than our past karma, and if yes, then is there any way to transform our past karmas in the present? And I'm adding to this where, and you've talked about this in your book about sowing the seeds for our future. So if you could just throw some light on karma and the past, present, and future.
Well, from a Buddhist perspective, we have had endless lifetimes, and all intentional actions of body, speech, and mind are sowing seeds which may in the future come into ripening when the causes and conditions are ready. Mm-hmm. So therefore, if you imagine a vast, innumerable field, then it is chock-a-block with billions of these seeds. Some of them are quite weak, some of them are very strong, some of them are very alike, some of them are very different. But anyway, when the causes and conditions arise, then they will sprout. So, in other words, now in this lifetime, whatever is happening to us, especially major things happening, I don't say every time you take a sip of tea, but in general, the general direction is as a result of actions which have been committed in the past. Good actions, bad actions. Good actions have good seeds, bad actions have poisonous seeds. So, okay, so in general, there's not too much we can do about that. That's already happened. But as they sprout up, how we respond to what is happening in the present is creating the karma for the future. So in other words, moment to moment, we are eating up the past and creating the future. It's very dynamic. And we do have a choice. It's not all fate. There might be certain very strong karmas which are likely to happen. But in general, how we decide whether our response to what is happening is skillful or unskillful will determine what happens next. So always there are two ways you can go. And depending, that will then set up a whole new set of karmas, depending which way we decide to go, especially in major decisions. So it's a very dynamic process. It's not that it's all laid down in stone. It's changing moment to moment to moment. And we cannot really know what's happening or why what we did that is creating what's happening now in the present. And that's not even important, what we did in the past. The past is gone. What is important is how we respond in the moment. So that, because that is creating what will happen next. And this is why it's important to be more aware, more present, so that we can make skillful decisions.
So in some sense, we hold the knowledge that it's our past karmas that are ripening in the present, but you're saying that through skillful means and through our response to that ripening process, that we will change both our present and the way the future seeds are sown. Is that right, Jetsunma?
Dynamic process, moment to moment to moment. It's not like it's all set down exactly like this and it's going to be like that. And I couldn't do anything because this is my karma. I mean, you know, things ripen, and then how we deal with that is up to us. That's not karma. I mean, that might be very much part of our, you know, our patterning, but, you know, we are free always. to respond in a skillful way or an unskillful way. It's up to us.
So, which means by that measure, there is no such thing as destiny, Jetsunma. I mean, forgive me if I misunderstood it, because we are in some sense in control of our karmas and how they manifest. We can't really, relegate anything to destiny and say, this is my destiny, and therefore I can't do anything to change my job, right?
You know, in the sutras, there is a story of the Buddha outside the town. They see this beggar, this kind of tramp who had just recently died. And the Buddha said, this man came from a very wealthy family. And he came to me when he was young and wanted to be a monk. So I ordained him, but then his family came and persuaded him to come back and get married. So then he stopped being a monk. He went back home. He got married. Then in time, he became a drunkard and a gambler. And in the end, he ended up like this, a tramp or a beggar. And the Buddha said, if he had stayed as a monk, he would have become an arhat. But he chose to go back. And so this is what happened to him. So, I mean, the point is there that he had a choice. He could have said no to his family, in which case he would have carried on, and eventually being so close to the Buddha, he would have become an arhat. But because he was pulled back into the worldly life, he screwed up. So we have to be careful with our decisions, because they lead off, you see, karmas come together, leading in a different direction to what would have happened if he'd chosen the right path instead of the left path.
Which makes me curious about merit, Jetsunma. I mean, imagine the Buddha telling you that you need to be ordained and someone walking away from that. So if you could just talk a little bit about merit, and of course the special emphasis that Buddhism lays on merit, and in general what merit is, how do we collect, because we like to collect merit, and how it comes into play in our lives.
Basically, merit or punya, it just means good karma. When we do something good, then that creates punya. And it is believed that if we have a lot of obstacles in our lives, if we have a lot of ill health, or we're very poor, or we meet with people who are difficult, or anything, we have problems, or especially on the spiritual path, we try to arrange for a retreat and it all goes wrong, or we have a lot of obstacles outside or inside, then this is the joint result of having made some negative karma and at the same time not having made enough positive karma. So if everything goes very smoothly and things kind of click together in our outer life, or especially for our Dharma life, that we meet with the right teachers, we meet with the right teachings and the right opportunities, our mind goes towards the Dharma and is happy within the Dharma, then that is a result of having made lots of punya. And so there are many ways to make punya. There is worldly punya and spiritual punya. Worldly punya is when we do anything with the idea I did it. So, for example, if I offered you a gift, then I would give it with the idea I am giving you a gift. Tenzin Palmo was giving Suruchi a gift, right? And this makes, and I'm happy to do that. I want to give you the gift to make you happy. So that is a very positive thing, but it's caught by three problems. I am doing something to a self-existent you, right? So we're trapped within these three misapprehensions of how things really are, right? On a relative level, I am doing this for you. So that will make that will make positive karma in the sense of worldly karma, good karma, but it won't add anything towards the wisdom goal. The wisdom goal is recognizing that the non-self-existence is offering to someone else who is non-self-existent, and they're pure in the three cycles of understanding that it's all inherent emptiness, and that it's like a dream in which we are fulfilling this role, and we don't cling to the idea of separate identity. If we can do a good action of any sort in that kind of mind frame, then of course it increases also the load of wisdom. But most people are just thinking in a relative term. And so the quickest way to make punya, apart from going on pilgrimage, is generosity. And then, if not lifetime, in future lifetimes, things open up. It opens doors. It's like having, you know, a first-class ticket, right, to travel. You know, it's so much more comfortable. And you have a first-class ticket because you have the money to pay for it, right? So it's like that you have this store of good karma. So therefore, everything is so much more comfortable in samsara. But it doesn't get you out of samsara. It just makes samsara more comfortable.
Could you expand on this a little more, Jetsunma, when you say it doesn't get you out of samsara, but just makes samsara more pleasurable?
Because you're still stuck in the relative. Oh, I mean, you're still doing your actions, believing in a self-existent I who is doing these actions. So therefore, in itself, it will lead to auspicious connections and auspicious circumstances, but of itself, it is not going to get rid of the idea of I doing an action, right? So this is the problem. So when, you know, when one does, especially in rituals, then there's always a part in which you try to dissolve everything so as to create not only the relative aspect of punya, but also the ultimate aspect of punya.
So this relative aspect of punya can be a little confusing when you say that if we identify with this me as the giver and there being you as being the recipient, whether we do it as a cognitive process or not, Jetsunma, there will always be, at the relative level where we are functioning, there will always be the subject, object, and predicate, right?
Exactly, but because you're working on the relative level, therefore it doesn't lead to the ultimate level. The only way it could lead to the ultimate level would be if at the same time you dedicated the merit for Dharma practice. You know, may I in all my lifetimes meet with the perfect guru, may I follow the path. By this merit, may I and all beings attain to the perfect path, meet with perfect teachers, and attain to enlightenment. So this is why also in the Tibetan tradition, they, at the end of any practices which are considered meritorious, like pujas and things, they dedicate the merit for all sentient beings. Because again, it's like if we say now giving this Dharma questions and answers, we made this much merit, right? So the merit here is this much. And then if I'm thirsty and I drink it, that's all gone. Whereas if I take this bit of water and I pour it in a big lake or an ocean, it will never finish, right?
Right.
So likewise, if we dedicate the merit to all sentient beings for their well-being and happiness and their liberation and enlightenment, then that merit will never deplete and will just go on and on and on. So in that way, even worldly relative merit can eventually result in spiritual benefits.
Right. Provided we are not spiritually materialistic about it. So we just have to be,
We don't know shunyata. And we don't, but it doesn't matter. We can dedicate it to realizing this in the future.
Right. So if you don't mind going on for just a short bit more, I'll ask another question around karma, and then maybe we can start closing down, Jetsunma.
Go on.
So for those who don't believe in karma and rebirth, there may be no strong reason to renounce or to practice or to live morally. What do you have to say about that? And I guess I'm also touching upon hedonism and nihilism in some sense, but in general, especially for those who are privileged and who don't believe in karma, punya, rebirth, what kind of conduct could they have, and why would they even be motivated to practice? They're just living the good life.
Well, I mean, many of the great humanitarians of the world didn't have any particular religious views, but they recognized that to lead a good life, which will bring happiness to themselves and others, they should not only take care of themselves, but they should do something for the world. That gives them a sense of some meaning to their life, because so many people, yes, they have all the comforts, they have all the luxuries, but they have no meaning. And so they end up as alcoholics and whatever, because, chasing after phantom, because the genuine happiness does not lie in that direction. But if we live our lives to benefit both ourselves and benefit others, then our life has meaning, and there is an inner joy of feeling that I didn't waste this life. I did something meaningful with it. Whether we believe in karma or not. I mean, I always say, look, if the consciousness goes on, then you will be very glad that you used your life meaningfully and helped others as well as yourself.
Right.
If there is no consciousness and that's the end, at least you used your life in a beautiful way. And so it's a win-win situation. The people who are the most futile are those who only think about themselves and their own pleasures. And then at the end of it, they think, what was all that about? I just wasted a human life. And as I say, many very wealthy people, famous people, etc., they're all into alcohol, drugs, and despair inwardly, because their lives have no purpose beyond their own pleasure. Pleasure, as the Buddha said, is like salty water. The more you drink, the thirstier you get, but you never get satisfied. You just end up dying of thirst on the shores of the lake of the Dharma. So, if you want to have a happy life, a meaningful life, benefit yourself, benefit others, then, be kind, be good, be generous, and purify the mind, because we all live within our minds. So it's a win-win thing. Even many Buddhists in the West don't believe in karma or rebirth, but nonetheless, they are good people, and they certainly do what they can to be of benefit in this world while they're here.
That's beautiful, because it ties in to this question, which I thought would be our closing question, although I have no desire to end this conversation. I'm enjoying it so much and so grateful for the wisdom that you're sharing, Jetsunma, which is, what is the simplest way to love life, self, and humanity at large?
I think, again, it's what we have been dealing with, which is that to recognize that our essential nature is so beautiful. And, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they have so much compassion. It's not just for sick little puppies and beggars on the street. It's for all of us, looking at our great potential, our spiritual potential, which is a level of happiness which we cannot even imagine, and wisdom and understanding and compassion which we really don't even guess could possibly be part of who we truly are. That is our human potential, and yet what we do with it. You know, and that's enough to make even the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas weep. But they smile. And they smile because they know, despite all these thick black clouds in the monsoon season, eventually we will open up and we will have a lovely, clear autumn. The skies will be clear and blue because that's their nature. So looking at ourselves, we can be kind to ourselves, be friendly with ourselves, appreciate our goodness, and, you know, try to work on all the things, our faults. Everybody has faults. That's part of the path. And look at everyone else. You know, people everywhere want to be happy. They really do. They might have very weird ideas of what happiness is, but basically people want to feel well within themselves. Mm-hmm. And because we're so deluded, we do all the things which are going to cause suffering to ourselves and to others. And the intention is just that we're going to get pleasure, but they don't understand, because of our delusions, that we're going in the opposite direction. It's like we're drinking poison, expecting that we're going to feel healthy. And so how sad that is, because every single being, not just humans, but animals and insects and they all want to feel okay. They all don't want to be hurt. They all want to feel happy in their heart. And so every being that you meet, look at them and think, may you be well and happy. I don't care that you're a bastard. May you be well and happy. Because that's what you really want. You just don't understand how to get it. So then like that, also this is another way to train our mind during the day. Everyone we meet, not just the people on our own social level, but the taxi drivers and rickshaw wallahs and anybody, your servants, everybody. As the Buddha said, to each one, their own self is most dear. And that's what we have to remember. It doesn't matter on our social position, it doesn't matter on our level of wealth, it doesn't matter on our age, our gender. To each one, their own self is most dear. And they want that self to be happy, to be well, not to be hurt, not to be ignored, not to be insulted. So we can do that for them. It's just smile, it's say thank you is enough for many people, because they're usually overlooked.
And how wonderful it would be if we were able to even just go beyond this sense of self and I and the other and overcome this duality. Then this whole question wouldn't arise at all, right? Yeah.
Well, this is what we are practicing for, to get to that level which we all possess, is our true nature. And like space, you can't divide it up.
Right.
So this is what we recognize in everybody that we meet.
If there's one takeaway for me from this pandemic, is that how we human beings can show up as a race for one another. I mean, there's so much hope and potential. So I just hope that we don't lose the possibility of evolving and transformation, you know, that's in here for us.
There's so much goodness in the world. You know, the newspapers and media is all about what is bad. Yeah. But at least what is bad is still new. So that's something. That's encouraging. Right. But what goodness in the world, nobody reports on that. And yet it's all around us the whole time. I mean, there's enormously much more goodness than there is evil. And we just have to open our eyes and recognize that in others and in ourselves.
You're so right, Jetsunma, that there is so much, so the goodness is so enormous and so much more prevalent, but unfortunately the media plays up everything that's tantalizing and negative, and that's the worldview we start to create for ourselves and think of everything as bad and negative, but actually there's so much hope and possibility and so much goodness to celebrate.
Yeah.
And abundance, there's so much abundance.
Much media,
Right.
you know, really. So because they're just, you know, they're mostly it's rubbish. It's all the sordid aspects of human beings, or the lowest part of human. Why do we need to saturate our brain with that every day?
Right.
You know, all the murders, rapes, corruption. I mean, we know. Why do we need to read about it?
Mm.
Read a Dharma book and contemplate something beautiful.
Or listen to Mozart.
Yeah, cultivate a good heart. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, you say this often, and in your book also you've said it about being good and being kind as being the most important, touchstones for us to conduct ourselves.
Imagine the world if we were all good and kind. Just that much.
Right. Okay, with that note, Jetsunma, I'd like to just end this session. And something you said this afternoon about realizing the empty nature of our mind. May we realize that soon enough, so that we may also realize the emptiness of phenomena, especially this particular phenomena, which has us all by our hair and teeth. So with that, I just want to express my immense gratitude to you. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. And please come back and talk to us again.
Of course, my dear, you're all in my heart. And really, from my heart, I wish you all well. And that, you know, this whole time where we have the opportunity to understand and to learn and to progress is not wasted. You know, that we take something with us from this time. Not this time here, but this time, the whole pandemic, you know, we really, we should learn something from it, not just carry on the same as usual. So thank you very much, Suji, for inviting me and all those beautiful people in Mumbai. And may you all everywhere be.
All over the world, actually. There are people, students of yours all over the world, including Brazil and Australia, everywhere. People waving to you from wherever they are. We pray for your long life, Jetsunma, and good health. Stay well, and please keep coming back. And we look forward to the day you will come to Mumbai and teach us again in your physical presence. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And to everybody who's taken part in this, really, may all beings be well and happy.
Thank you. Thank you. And wishing the same to all of you and all the nuns at DGL. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.